Guys, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, but I just want to point out real quick something. People have been asking me how the content schedule is going to go in the first week for the final shape, so I just wanted to make a quick point here. Bungie recently confirmed that the roadmap for the final shape is as follows. In the day of June 4th, 2024, which is when the final shape will release, the Pale Heart, tons of sandbox changes, Prismatic, a lot of those things will launch. But only 7 missions out of the 8 missions will launch on day 1. Only then there will be a questline after finishing mission 7 called Wildcard. You will have to complete that in order to start the raid, and the raid will be 3 days after Final Shape launches. And then once the Final Shape raid is completed, the last and final mission, the 8th mission, will be available. And once after finishing that, will the Final Shape story be completed. And that next Tuesday, which would be June 11th, if I'm to be corrected, is when the start date of Echoes will begin. As I just want to point out, Echoes is going to be unlike any other, technically, season, but it's its own episode. But if you were curious on other content being launched with an expansion, Season of Defiance, Season of Risen, and Season of Hunt all launch with the said expansion because one, it was a season, and two, because the content wasn't always directly in line with the story of that said expansion. Echoes, being a episode, is a bit different, and two, it's all about the consequences and the aftermath of the final shape. So why would it start with the final shape if we haven't finished it? So I just want to point out there. And again, too, is that a lot of people who buy final shape will also get Echoes. But people are probably likely, some people came up to me the other day and they were like, yo, Redrix, once Final Shape is done, I'm out of here. And I was like, bro, you paid for Echoes, why don't you check it out? And a lot of people, well, I don't know what Echoes is about. Redrix, what is Echoes about? So in today's video, we're going to do a sort of speculation preview, if you will, into Echoes, because there's a lot of stuff going on about how this will work and how it will be aligned. And I just wanted to cover it with you guys, because again, we don't know too much as of right now about it, but it's definitely something I wanted to talk about. Now, Echoes, looking at the name and looking at some of the art that was given to us back in the August showcase, is going to focus on the Vex. And like my good friend Exula said, is that Bungie is probably looking into having new Vex units. We had our last new Vex unit back in Beyond Light, but with the little simple speculation pattern that we have received in the last couple of years, we have seen a new change in some of the old enemy factions. Like in Beyond Light, we saw a change with the Fallen, with, Stasis fallen enemies. Then we've seen Hive Guardians and a lot of changes to the Hive in Witch Queen, and then the Cabal into the Shadow Legion and Lightfall. Final Shape now will likely just see not any crazy new additions to any of the old enemy races, as a brand new enemy race will be coming out known as the Dread, with a couple new enemy types in there. So with that, Echoes is likely going to follow a lot of the Vex storyline, as we can check out in the concept art, and it makes basic sense as we haven't had a Vex release in some time. And two, I know a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, Redrix, this season has been focusing on Vex. First off, that's the Soul Divisive, and that doesn't count because Soul Divisive sucks doo-doo. But two, I actually want to talk about now is that with us getting Prismatic and with us getting this new power, there's a lot to talk about, because as Bife said, the Vex are going to have a bigger reason now to either flee or fight us. So the Vex is going to see probably a much bigger and prominent role now once we get Prismatic and the Witness is defeated. So that's sort of the narrative structure of what I'm looking at there. There's been a lot of speculations, a lot of leaks going out that, again, we have to only take a grain with salt with, but a lot of them have been talking about how Venus, Mercury are likely contenders of locations featuring in this piece of content. Every 6 weeks, and that will be 3 weeks accordingly, week 6, week 12, and week 18, we'll see new content, new activities, new exotics, new lore, and new story. And with those weeks, could likely see some of the old destination, like Mercury, come back. We could likely see Venus have a huge role, and that's where I'm kind of leaning towards with Venus. Bungie brought it back for Vogue, but not really the entire destination, but it's looking very likely, and a lot of what people have said is that Venus is one of the biggest contenders to actually come back with tons of content, and Bungie will actually add more of the destination over time in the Echoes release. Remember, episodes are standalone experiences. They don't technically need to be, done one at a time and done in an order, as with this is that you could do Heresy first, then Echoes, or you could do Revenant, Heresy, and then Echoes. There is no order that needs to be done here. But looking at that, we have Echoes coming out first, and it's likely going to focus with tons of Vex-related characters. We have seen that characters like Osiris, Mithrax, people from Season of the Splicer, and even Praedyth from the Vault of Glass could be making a huge return in this season, which is pretty crazy. We could see characters that had a huge influence and a huge impact in the Final Shape also overlap into this episode. This episode will be launching exactly right after Final Shape ends, so we could see some things in the Pale Heart as well. But I just want to point out is that with this, it's definitely something we don't really know entirely all about, because episodes are interesting, and again, they're not like seasons. They're not supposed to be like seasons. So with the format being a bit different, it's hard to pinpoint what Bungie is trying to achieve and what their main goal is on how content will be delivered. We do know is that Bungie said is that there's going to be more cinematic storytelling, more loot than seasons have ever provided with these new episodic cadence of content. So looking at that, we can expect a longer story, as we are usually received within a week, 7 weeks of story with, an ending mission and an exotic quest. It's likely we're going to receive probably double or triple of that if a whole season is going to last in this 6-week cadence for a total of 3 acts. If 3 acts, 1 act provides 6 weeks of content of story, and we get 3 of them, we are likely seeing 18 weeks of story. And that is pretty crazy to look at. We could likely see more match-made activities, as we receive about 1 to 2 to maybe 3. We could likely receive even more, or a lot of more changes to a said match-made activity. There could be a lot more leeway room for the Crucible and PvP. As you guys know, PvP is definitely an interesting bunch if you're interested in those sandbox changes and the changes that is provided there. Maybe if there's some more time for Bungie to, with the PvP team with that, as maybe they're not always focusing on an expansion. Again, expansion future and all that is still unclear at this point. We have to wait till Luke Smith can make a proper announcement, as apparently after the Final Shape is concluded, Luke Smith will come out and talk about the future. Moreover, is that there's going to be a dungeon key that will be arriving for the Final Shape year. Bungie announced this, and there will be 2 new dungeons arriving in year 7. With that, we can likely see that Bungie are going to make a new dungeon either in these according patterns that I likely am looking at. We could get a new dungeon in Echoes and in Heresy, and then Revenant we will see a raid of some kind. Bungie also could make it so we don't see a new raid, and that Revenant and Heresy will receive new dungeons, but that would switch up the entire pattern that we've got over the years. Bungie could also likely do is provide us with a dungeon in Echoes, and then a dungeon in Revenant, and in Heresy we could see a new raid of some kind. Again, the pattern is little bit weird, and we haven't had a proper understatement on what the pattern will be for the end game type of content. I could see Echoes not arrive with the dungeon due to the new Final Shape raid coming out, but I don't know what Bungie's plan is for 18 weeks or so without a new end game activity. I would see a dungeon more properly coming out in Echoes as well, because it is technically something new and it's not connected heavily with the Final Shape expansion. Or am I biting my own tongue here? I don't really know. So I kind of figure it as his own thing, and with that we have to wait and see what Bungie will do. And yeah, so that pretty much sums up the video. I hope you guys did enjoy, and if you guys did, then please be sure to subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye guys.